Hello, please let me see your ticket stubs for the double-edged double bill. This week, Suspiria will dance until they're Breakin' 2, Electric Boogaloo. Each week, Adam Thomas and Thomas Mariani will come to the table to discuss the randomly slated yin and yang of a double feature. Then, both will have to pick a number between 1 and 10 in order to seal their fates for the next episode. One will have 2 good movies, the other 2 bad ones. Let the chaos begin. I am Thomas Mariani, and unfortunately, my co-host Ad, we mentioned this at the end of our last episode, he's going to be taking a bit of a break from the show for, the next couple weeks or so. So I'm just standing here on this stage, and I'm going to break dance by myself, but I can't save the rec center on my own. I need some kind of help from somebody out there who's gonna just come and pop and lock with me. Why, it's my guest host, the bigwig over at Talk Film Society, the podcast platform that we're on here, Mr. Marcelo J. Pico. Marcelo, start popping and locking.
Hello, it's me, Marcelo Pico, aka Mother Suspiria, here to help.
Is that your Breakin' 2 nickname? Like that's your Shabadoo?
And I'm gonna dance on the ceiling. Here we go.
Oh, look at him, guys. I can see it. He's doing it right now in front of me.
The entire room is in red tint. Oh, God.
But welcome, Marcelo. You've been a guest on the show before, though weirdly, this is the first time you've been a guest since we've been a part of Talk Film Society. You're such a big wig out there, have your own podcast to record. You haven't had a chance to come back on the show until now when I desperately need you.
Yes, it just so happens that, yes, I'll talk about it in the Plex section, but there was an instance very recently where Thomas brought this up, and I go, well, all right, you convinced me. I'll come back to the show. You're basically begging and pleading for me to come back, and hey, I'm back, here to help. I know Adam is away, so hopefully I can fill that slot. I won't be as negative or as grouchy as Adam is. I like the guy. I'm a lot more positive. I'm not going to reveal my thoughts in these films, but let's just say I like them both.
Well, all right. Leave, like a great podcast, you do it all on Front Street so they can stop listening. Great.
Exactly.
Wonderful. That's why you make the big bucks in this business, sir.
100%. The biggest bucks, sir. The biggest bucks.
So much money. For sure. But we did invite you onto this even before Adam announced his sabbatical because I sent you a list of topics as I usually do with guests, and you immediately gravitated toward our topic for this week, which we're doing in honor of Magic Mike's Last Dance. No, I'm sorry, Marcelo, we're not doing a Steven Soderbergh episode. Unless you want to do one. I'm sure whenever we do another one, we'll probably have you back on for it, but that's not what we're doing today. I'm sorry.
I did listen to the last episode where you guys picked the movies for this episode, and I can't remember who had it as one of their picks that did not get chosen, but one of y'all, Magic Mike, is an alternate, and oh boy, was... again, I'm going to have fun with this episode. This is going to be fun, but yes, I'm super excited for the new Magic Mike's Last Dance. I am a huge Soderbergh fan. He's my favorite film director. I'll participate in any way to get people excited for the new Magic Mike. And I love the genre of dance.
Yeah, because our topic for today is dance movies because of that particular movie coming out. And I'm curious, Marcelo, what attracts you to the idea of dancing on film? Out of all the different sort of like musical subgenres and such, why is dance such a big one for you?
It wasn't until a few years ago that I really got into musicals as an adult. Like as a kid, and I'm gonna tie musicals into dance because it's all connected, right? Mm-hmm. So over the last few years, thanks to a friend of mine, she recommended to me some great musicals, some great dance movies that I had never seen before. Because as a kid, I grew up to think that I was maybe too good for dance, or I was like, boy, I shouldn't be watching, dance movies / musicals. But no, that's wrong. So finally, I watched for the first time recently, like Chicago, West Side Story, like all the big important dance movies. And yeah, and then connecting this to Magic Mike. Here we go. I do love the Magic Mike movies. Super excited for the new one, like I said, but Steven Soderbergh in particular, he does know how to shoot like a dance sequence. Like few other people can. Working as a cinematographer on like XXL, like his sequence where Channing Tatum, dances in a garage to Pony by Genuine, that is brilliant filmmaking. That's a brilliant dance sequence. So I can appreciate dance sequences. I'm totally on board with like any dance/musical that you throw at me now. I'm on board. So yeah, it took me 30 years to like appreciate and fully like gravitate towards these musical/dance movies. And yeah, hey, it's one of those aspects of like acting, performing, that I think maybe goes a bit like underappreciated. The dance aspect, the physicality of it. So when I see that on screen, like say in a Suspiria remake or Breakin to Electric Boogaloo, I appreciate the aspect of performing. So yeah, there you go. There's my answer. That's why I gravitate towards like dance movies.
Yeah, I mean, that started with me a bit younger because a big thing was I have two younger sisters and they were both in like dance classes. So it became sort of like a part of the household where like they would love any kind of dance movies. I saw Save the Last Dance many times, Chicago, a lot of those like early 2000s movies were like a big part of that, just in my cinematic upbringing, as it were. And I've always appreciated, I guess, the art of dance, as it were. I think especially when you capture on film, it's so fascinating because obviously by the nature of like what dance usually is, it's usually on a stage and it's so ephemeral where it's just like you only see it for that one performance and then it's gone, as opposed to like capturing it on film. I think there's a lot of interesting different ways that you can like, get certain angles, get certain kind of like feelings about like what the actual dance kind of represents for the story in general, and also just especially in the case of like a Magic Mike, it's hot, quite frankly.
Oh yeah,
it gets like really fucking steamy, especially like by the time you get to especially like Magic Mike XXL, where like they're going full board with like how hot the actual choreography is and how much it's like so clearly about not just the sexy like dudes with their shirts off. It's like, no, it's actually about like that kind of intimacy you have with like a person who you bring up on the stage and make them feel special kind of thing. And I think that's like really charming. I rewatched both of those actually in the last couple days, and it's been really fun revisiting them. And I'm definitely very excited for Last Dance, where it's, I guess Tatum's the only one returning, right?
Yeah, I mean, so far as we know, I do know that they're not going to screen it for critics, which leads me to believe maybe the marketing is hiding something. Maybe Warner Brothers is hiding something. Maybe the boys will be back for 3 and we don't know it yet.
Oh no, all our dancers are gone. What are we gonna do? And then Joe Manganiello like breaks open the door, just like,
yes,
someone need a dancer. Like, fuck yeah, fuck your Avengers shit. That's my kind of like, oh, they're coming back together, baby. The band's back.
That's my hope. That's my dream. I'm fully anticipating Last Dance, and yes, I may have watched the trailer several times. So I do think we'll see the boys like end in a little cameo. Maybe like, he does a Zoom call, Mike does, and goes, "Hey, Kevin Nash's character, what do you think of this? What should I do for my London performance of this Magic Mike stage show?" So yeah, I'm fully expecting them to show up somehow. But yeah, I do love those movies, Magic Mike movies. There was a turning point when I saw Double XL for like maybe the 5th or 6th time, and I showed it to an ex of mine. And then by the end of the movie, she was like, that movie's not good. And I go, wait a second. So I knew right there in my heart that I was going to defend XXL until the end of time. Because even if like that person who I was with for several years didn't like it, I knew eventually I could find somebody who did like it. So that's my journey in life, is finding a partner who appreciates XXL on the same level as I do.
I didn't like it as much the first time, but then rewatching it, especially this recent time, it's like, oh, why did I have any kind of issue with this? It's a Muppet movie, but with strippers.
That's a perfect analogy, Thomas.
It's so fun, yes.
It is so hard to describe to somebody. I was just trying to describe it to our mutual friend Marcus Irving, who I host several podcasts with at this point. Because he hasn't seen either Magic Mike's. XXL is just like this sort of like nearly plotless journey of these big hot men dancing across America to fulfill their dream of being the best dance troupe ever.
They're very sweet, lovable himbo guys who just like want to make women feel good while dancing, getting money.
It's a beautiful movie. And yeah, it's a favorite of mine. I know Soderbergh didn't direct it, but he edited it. He was a cinematographer. He has fingerprints all over it. I kind of wish we were talking about that movie, but hey, like I said before, these movies we're talking about for this episode, that's some pretty good dancing in it.
Yes, let's go ahead and get into, because at the end of our previous episode, we ended up randomly picking between 2 good and 2 bad choices for the show, and we ended up with our good pick, which was Adam's choice of Suspiria, the 2018 remake, and then our bad pick, quote-unquote, that was mine, of Breakin 2, Electric Boogaloo, though I think good and bad might be a bit more relative in this case. We'll talk about that more as we get to Breakin 2, but first we're going to be doing Suspiria.
When you dance the dance of another, you make yourself in the image of its creator.
I feel like I'm not even here yet.
The dumpling's incredible.
1, 2, 3.
The way she transmits her work.
You have to decide, what is it you want to be for this company?
There's more in that building than what you can see, Doctor.
You are living with dangerous people.
It's all a mess. The one out there. The one in here.
So Suspiria, the remake came out November 2nd, 2018 from director Luca Guadagnino. And obviously this is a remake of the Dario Argento movie. I'm curious, Marcelo, have you seen the original Suspiria? What are your thoughts on the original before we get into the remake here?
I have seen the original Suspiria. It's been years. I purposefully didn't rewatch it for this episode because I'll just flat out say I think the 2018 remake is, from my memory, again, I haven't seen the original in such a long time, I think the remake is better because from what I remember, the original, it's a solid movie, pretty movie. In my memory, it's a little dull at times. I kind of wish there was more to it, but I mean, of course, I'm a fan. I'm not going to come on here and say the original Suspiria is bad, but from my memory,
No, that's exactly what you're saying, everybody. That's what Marcelo J. Pico officially says. Original Suspiria, bad.
but yes, I have to hand it to the remake because I gravitate towards the remake a lot more than say the original Suspiria. Because yeah, I appreciate the original. I understand why it's a classic, but I don't necessarily totally vibe with it.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've seen the original Suspiria, and I would say that's one of my favorites of the Argentos I've seen. I'm not hugely diverse in, like, Argento. My Italian ancestor's very angry about that, clearly. But I think that one's one of my favorites of his. But I think the big thing is, like, the original Suspiria is such a different movie compared to this one. And I think
Absolutely.
what works about the original is, like, it is very plotless. It's very short. It feels kind of like this ethereal nightmare movie that just is like you're stuck in this like dance academy where we're not doing a lot of dancing, but we're running around hallways as horrible like murders happen basically. And I love it for that and like all the colors and all the stuff that we talked about previously. But I think what works about the Suspiria remake, which I have not seen since I'd seen it in a theater. This is my first rewatch in like, I don't know, almost 5 years now. And I liked it then, and I appreciate it even more now, I think, because unlike any other horror remake, like when this was announced and it was originally like David Gordon Green was going to do it, and then he dropped out and there was like all this hullabaloo, I was really worried, like, why are you remaking Suspiria? What's the point of it? And I think what this movie gets right that a lot of other horror remakes fail to do is they take a lot of the basic DNA of the original movie and make their own movie out of that. And I think that's like what makes this stand out. I think is, I wouldn't say better than the original movie, but I would say is a worthy sort of reimagining, as it were, of the original movie.
Absolutely. And just to go back to Argento, I did just see for the first time Tenebrae. I think I'm pronouncing that right. That one blew me away. That one I wish Suspiria was more along the lines of that. But yeah, I'm also not. I haven't seen a lot of Argento, so I'm not an expert anyway. So please don't take my comments seriously when it comes to that. I'll tell you this about the remake, though. I love it now. Absolutely, I agree with you, Thomas. Like, it's its own thing. It's kind of even unfair to call it Suspiria. It should be called something else, you know, Suspiria remix or something. When I first saw this, I saw this at Fantastic Fest. I don't know if it was the premiere of it, the world premiere or whatever. It was like the North American premiere. It was the secret screening that year. That's what happens at Fantastic Fest. They go, it's a secret screening. It could be anything. It turned out to be Suspiria. After seeing it there for the first time, movie ended. I came out of it saying, I hate that movie. Which...
you weren't alone, to be fair. This is a very divisive movie when it came out.
Super divisive. And I was on that side. I was on the wrong side of history initially. But it's just one of those movies, and this is why I love it now, that just seeps into your brain. It's more of a vibe movie, as the kids say. It's all about the vibes. And it just stuck with me, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to give this another shot. Shortly thereafter, it was in theaters after its premiere at Fantastic Fest. Saw it again in a theater. I go, you know what? This is actually pretty good. I raised my star rating a bit more. Watched it again. I go, oh, you know what? This is great. Then I saw it, I think, 2 more times after that. So, and now I'm pretty much saying, yes, this is amazing. I love it. Rarely does it happen. It does happen where every once in a while where I do see a movie, I hate it, and it becomes a classic for me after several viewings. That happened to me with Michael Clayton when I first saw it. I came out of Michael Clayton saying, that's a dumb movie. Who cares? Whatever. Oh, another Tilda Swinton movie, actually. I just had that realization. I don't know what it is about Tilda. Maybe it requires a second watch for me, all her movies. But this in particular, yeah, I've seen it countless times, and I can say I definitely like it. But I get that divisiveness of this.
Yeah, and I think like a big part of that is like if you're, say, a horror person who like loves even like Italian horror, and you go into this movie that is like, it's weird where the horror definitely is there. There's kind of like this gradual build of dread that continues throughout this movie, but so much of it feels like a really like sad, depressed period drama. And then occasionally like a person will die horribly. And then just like, oh, I'm still like super bummed out about like Berlin circa 1977.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, you just took the words out of my mouth, Thomas, because like, yeah, the horror aspects are there. And it definitely has like these insanely disturbing kills. Like one of the first kills, maybe the first kill, I forget, where the woman is just like twisted like a pretzel, you know, slammed against the wall. I don't know what it was, but I've seen this movie countless times, like I said. But seeing it today, that scene really shook me up. It still has that power over me as a horror movie. But again, like those scenes. For a long movie like this, clocking in at what, like 2 hours 30 minutes, like those horror scenes are kind of few and far between, but they're still so effective. Yeah, and in between those horror scenes, yeah, it is like this psychological drama with like the background of Berlin, late 70s, raging on. But I mean, yeah, like I said, I think it works overall because you just have this sense of dread. And it came out at the perfect time in 2018 when so many themes that it's trying to say, the themes of this movie that's getting across, it feels so relevant now. I mean, more so back then in the fucking Trump era, but now it still sticks around. There are certain lines that repeat in my head. I think Dakota Johnson says at one point, it's like, why do people think things are going to get better? Which I think about a lot. That's depressing. But yeah, there's a lot of that in the movie, like more cerebral themes than straight up horror. But that horror definitely still sticks with me, especially those last like 20 minutes, which is just insane to me. I still think that's that final sequence where Mother Suspiria is revealed. Like Dakota Johnson goes, "Hey, it's me." That entire sequence still blows me away. I still can't believe like Luca got away with it.
Yeah, I think the big thing with sort of like what we're talking about in terms of like the themes that kind of resonate, it kind of feels like it's this weird thing where a lot of the horror-driven like witch stuff that was like so much more on the surface in like the original movie is like all here like done in like the shadows and in the background, as kind of like, oh, everyone's distracted basically outside by like the nightmare horrors of like, you know, like the the big like hijacking that was occurring, which I wasn't even aware was a historical event until honestly this movie. The hijacking of the airplane, and like apparently there was a lot of like these bombings and stuff that were mainly centered around like basically the youth of that era having difficulty with the fact that a lot of people who were in power that in the 70s were former people who used to either be Nazis or were affiliated with the Nazis in Germany. So it's a lot more like all that outward horror is distracting people from all the backdoor horrible shenanigans that are going on inside of this dance studio. And even the dance studio is recreating that kind of like those issues of like people, like youthful people trying to deal with like abusive folks in power who don't have like any actual idea what they're doing. And I think it's an interesting kind of like contrast. I think especially works with like a second time go around where like Dakota Johnson, who kind of feels like the perfect surrogate for the original version of Susie Bannon, Jessica Harper, who makes a cameo obviously in this movie. But in that original movie, she's very much like doe-eyed and like walking around like an innocent. And in this case, Dakota Johnson initially feels like that. But if you've seen the whole movie, spoilers, we're going to talk about the fucking movie if you haven't seen it. She ends up being like, oh, this was all an incredible disguise. Or at least like some kind of like, oh, this wasn't really realized to her until eventually the ending. Where she's like, oh, no, wait, no, I am Mother Suspiria. You're a fucking fraud. And I'm destroying this whole thing from the ground up and rebuilding it in, my image. Like, I love a lot of those thematics that are driving through about just like the youth completely dishonoring like the old fucks in power who are just completely destroying things. So just like, no, we're going to rebuild this for us, assholes. You gone. Bye.
Yeah. Again, this is a horror movie, but it's just so entrenched in the politics of that time. And I've read criticism where they said, like, the movie's politics here, like, really don't line up with what was actually happening, which I'm like, fair. But on the face of it, for a movie like this that's, a remake of a classic horror movie, I'm like, I can forgive some, like, historical facts. Like, I could take this as a historical fiction, right? Because it has witches in it. But yeah, that political stuff definitely sticks in my mind every time I see it now. Because, I didn't catch it the first time. Like I said, like, I hated this the first time I saw it. Because I felt like, why do we even care about who voted for who? Like, to be, like, the head mother in this, like, dance troupe. Like, who cares, right? But that, like you said, like, that's what this movie's about. It's about these people in power who abuse their power and a new generation coming in and trying to not make the same mistakes. And that's what sort of kills me about the ending in this movie, where I think, like, yes, like, Dakota Johnson comes in. She says, "I'm the new leader now. I'm gonna, kill all the people who voted for the last leader. Try to clean the slate." But it just feels like, oh, I hope they don't fall into the same traps again, because it does feel like it's a cycle. Like, every time this transfer of power happens, it seems like, or like as we see it on screen, like this transfer of power happens, it becomes like, oh, these things we've seen before already are happening again, like the last 10 minutes, like the epilogue. So that's what gets me about this movie too. It is about like a hopefulness of like, yes, the youth can, overtake, a fascist government, but will they fall into the same traps as before? So that's what gets me about the ending of this movie, and that's why it still sticks with me.
Well, if anything, I think what makes me a bit more positive of that ending is just the fact that there's admittedly a huge tragedy to it, but like the fact that Dakota Johnson has the empathy to have like a mercy killing for like the Chloe Grace Moretz and Mia Goth characters and all that, who we've seen be horrible victims of all this that we've been talking about, and even having also that empathy for we haven't really mentioned Tilda Swinton's in this movie, but one of her 3 parts in this movie, and probably the most like interesting, like different one, of Dr. Joseph Klemperer, the male old man, having even that empathy toward him, where it's just like, we shouldn't have, they shouldn't have done that to you. You are a complete like victim in this scenario. I totally apologize. And like giving that amount of empathy, I think, is what at least makes us feel at least like a bit more of a positive turn. Then again, I don't know, we won't be seeing necessarily a follow-up in the Suspiria timeline, even though I know Luca wanted to do that, but this was such a flop that he's probably not going to be able to do his version of like Inferno or Mother of Tears, which were the technical sequels to Suspiria that Argento did.
Well, hey, Luca's doing fine all on his own right now. I mean, I still love the guy. I love Bones and all. I know that's another divisive movie. But going to Tilda Swinton, God damn, is she amazing in this? Like, like playing those 3 roles, And I don't know, at times I get she's under heavy makeup playing the doctor. But at times I'm like, okay, that's silly. But then other times I'm like, oh god, she's nailing it. Like she's like disappearing behind that makeup. Like I buy it.
My one problem with the doctor is I wish they had pitched her voice down a bit.
Yeah.
That's still my one kind of thing that takes me out of it, because it's like, that clearly sounds like Tilda. Like,
Yeah.
you just pitched it a couple decimeters down, whatever. I don't know sound terms, even though I record a podcast. A few decibels
audio
maybe
expert.
down.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I think that would have made it work a bit better, but still, it's like phenomenal performance and amazing makeup.
Yeah. I mean, I think you do more research than me most of the time when you do your podcasting, Thomas. And I have several questions about this movie, but I think that's the joy of this movie. Is like there's so many things I can't answer, or I refuse to answer, about the story and the production. But one thing I've always wondered that maybe you don't know, is like, why cast Tilda as this doctor? And like that whole story, that whole gimmick of like when they announced the cast, like she was credited as like Lutz Epsdorf as like a quote unquote unknown actor. So they're trying to pull one on us, like, hey, we're not going to tell you Tilda Swinton's playing, a decrepit old man. But yeah, I've always wondered, it's like, why? I mean, I get that it plays thematically in sort of this world of women, and maybe the only person who can like infiltrate this world of women and connect with them is a man who is played by a woman. I kind of have that loose connection with like that theme, but I don't know. Like, do you know of any like rationale there, Thomas, of why Tilda decided to go Dr. Strangelove with this movie?
I'm not exactly sure of like the reasoning why necessarily was her. Though I think like it was maybe, from what I vaguely remember, I think it was kind of written in that she would at least play those parts necessarily. But I agree with you that I think like what matters more is like thematically what I think what it plays into is that because you have like this woman playing like this part of this man who is like older and also has like dealt with so much of like the trauma that's been going on here and has this like empathy. It feels like it's definitely Tilda being able to like play sort of like the three different sides of this, where you have kind of like Joseph is the much more empathetic human side, Marcos is pure monster, vile, awful, and then even Blanc has this weird kind of middle ground where you can tell like she doesn't want necessarily to follow the same ways as Marcos, but isn't more just a power grab and all this other stuff. I think like she kind of represents three different sides of like this older generation, as it were, and I think she does a really good job with that.
That's a brilliant take on it. I'm glad you said it, because like I didn't really fully connect that, but that makes 100% sense. One thing I'll say about Tilda in this, like she's amazing. Like she nails all those roles in this movie. Pretty much every single film she chooses to do, she does something interesting in it. I just saw Eternal Daughter, and she plays two roles in that, and I was blown away by it. Like one, she's playing like a younger version of herself, and the other role, she's playing like her own mother. So goddamn, like she can do anything. I'm just gonna praise Tilda Swinton right here and say, like, yeah, like it's one of those performances, plural, that just really captivates me, and it's one huge reason why I love this movie.
Yeah, though I think like what's so great is like this entire cast. I feel like you have such a like great group of actresses doing such a great job with like I mentioned Dakota Johnson this year, because along with last episode we covered Bad Times at the El Royale, which was like I think came out like a month or so before this movie. And I think this was the year where I really felt like, oh wow, she's like really popping for me, because before this she was in the 50 Shades movies, and I just kind of felt like, oh, you're doing the best you can with this material necessarily. You're trying so hard, and I appreciate it. Like in those two movies, I think she shows like so much range, especially like I said in this movie, you totally buy her as like an innocent who's kind of like doe-eyed and out there, just like, oh yeah, I love dancing. And then as things go along, you see like what the Blanc character that Tilda's playing kind of sees, like these are weird, interesting turns I didn't necessarily expect. Like even the way that she dances, which this movie has way more dancing than the original one does. The way that she'd like dance almost like violently, and how that like obviously contrasts, whether it be with like that scene that we were talking about where she's kind of voodoo tethered to the Olga character and she's brutally like bunched up into a pretzel because of these movements, or even later on when you have like the big group dance that's going on, or even any of the practice stuff. It feels so much like she has this like inner darkness to her that we're like, okay, maybe this sheepishness is like hiding something odd and bizarre. And then by the time it eventually is revealed, it's like, oh, I'm the reincarnation of the actual mother, and I'm here to fuck you all up. It's like, oh no, this makes perfect sense.
Yeah. Oh God, Dakota Johnson. So I'm with you. Like, I think this and El Royale, which I just remembered also played at that Fantastic Fest, El Royale. So I had a Dakota Johnson like double feature during that festival. But yeah, after El Royale, I'm like, I'm on board with Johnson. I did see the first 50 Shades movie. I remembered her like in her little roles in like Social Network and 21 Jump Street.
Right.
But after this, I'm like, yes, I'm on board with anything you do. Like most recently, I saw her in Cha Cha Real Smooth. That movie itself, whatever. But her performance in that, she's amazing in it. Oh God, I loved her in that movie. So that transformation of like timid person who, very mysterious. Those flashbacks, like to, I'm assuming was like an Amish community. I still not exactly sure. Because it's supposed to be her family that we see, like her mother.
It's at the very least, she's like in a very rural environment.
Right. Those flashbacks connecting Dakota to that leaves it as like a mystery leading up to that reveal, and then when that reveal happens, you're like, oh, I'm on board. And she definitely delivers in that performance of this like now new leader of this dance troupe.
I think particularly my favorite moment of hers is the bit where she's talking to Blanc about just like it felt like what I would imagine it would be to fuck. Oh, like a man? No, like an animal? And I'm like, oh, okay. Whoa, what the fuck is going on here? That's interesting. But yeah, like I said, the whole cast is full of great, like Mia Goth, who has quickly become one of my favorite like actresses right now, even before X and Pearl. Like around the time like Cure for Wellness, I was just like, she is very distinct and interesting as a performer, just the way that not only she looks, but also the way she just carries herself. She's so fascinating. I haven't seen Infinity Pool yet.
Oh my God.
But I've heard very interesting things about her in that. But I think this was especially around the time as well where I'm just like, I want to see her do anything. Like particularly when she becomes like possessed later on after she has that horrible leg break and then she's dancing with like those weird like crystal colored eyes. I'm just like, she is like freaking me the fuck out, but keep doing it. You're doing a great job.
Yeah, speaking of great years, like she did Suspiria this year, Mia Goth did, and High Life.
Yes.
I distinctly remember High Life and being like, first off, what the fuck's going on in this movie? And second off, like, God, she's amazing. I have vague memories of her in A Cure for Wellness, but again, like Dakota Johnson, after Suspiria, after her run in 2018, Mia Goth, I'm on board. Like, I liked her in Emma. She was, like, nice and cute in that. But then the X and Pearl movies blew me away, Pearl in particular. And yeah, Infinity Pool. Oh, my God. Thomas, I can't wait for you to see Infinity Pool. I mean, it's another instance where I'm like, the movie itself, but I gave that movie an extra star on Letterboxd just because of Mia Goth and what she does in that movie.
Well, look, we all know that she is a star.
I know, she's a star. But I just say this about her performance in Infinity Pool, not to give anything away, but there are scenes towards the end where she's just going for it. And my packed theater, because I went opening night, they ate it up. It's like they knew what she was doing. They were on her wavelength. We all were. And we just ate that performance up. So, god damn. Again, like Dakota Johnson, I'm with her till the end now. Like anything she's in, I'm seeing it.
It's even more impressive if you've ever seen her do like actual interviews where like there's that interview that was going around about like what she would do if she wasn't an actor, and she's talking like she's a fucking Dickensian orphan.
Yeah.
I would have a chocolate factory. I'm like, oh, this is so unlike any of these weird, bizarre performances she's done. She's just like so interesting as an actress. But I think like I'm curious though, what do you feel about why we're all here today? The dancing. How do you feel about the dancing in Suspiria in particular?
I think it does such a great job of connecting the dancing to the story, and I should have dug deeper into the dance they do, the main dance that they're like training for, they're practicing for, and they do towards the end of the movie. Because I did hear Swinton's character, Tilda's character, mentions like, yes, like this was written 40 years ago, like after the war. So I'm like, okay, yeah, that obviously has some connection to this. To the then of 1977. Again, playing into like who's in power back then to who's in power 40 years ago, before 1977. It's like, yeah, like everybody knows what was happening in Germany at that point. So to do a dance sequence, like to do a dance performance from that era in 1977, I think that says something. But the dance itself, like, goddamn, like, I don't know whether or not they use like doubles, but if they did, maybe they did. I was fooled because a lot of it I did feel like was performed by the actresses. I think Dakota Johnson at least felt like she was going for it in those shots where I see that it's her dancing. Same with like Mia Goth and with the other actresses too. I was talking about that horror sequence, that murder sequence of like that woman being Olga, right, being twisted into a pretzel as Dakota Johnson is like connected to her with those witchy powers. That is a phenomenal sequence. Like Dakota Johnson's dancing, that performance connected to that straight up murder, brilliant stuff. So yeah, I think the dancing in this ties into the plot of the movie so well that I mean, you mentioned it. The original Suspiria had little dancing. I don't remember much of the dancing in that, but this movie, like, this is definitely like part dance movie. Like this definitely, and it does get into like the physicality of it all, like the as a practice, like those sequences where Dakota Johnson is like training to be the protagonist of this performance. That was like it's like a peek behind the curtain of like these dancers that you don't really see on screen. It's like the jumping, the physical toll it takes on your body, all of that. Coming into it, maybe for the first time, I was also like, why is there so much dancing in this movie? Which I'm like, you idiot, that's part of the story.
Even down to, there's a great thing I didn't notice until this watch where, like, there's the point right before the Olga dance happens where Blanc is touching Dakota Johnson's hands, and you linger on her hands for a bit, and there's a bit of that shimmer that's like shows up later and stuff like that, where it's like, oh, it's almost as if like she's casting a spell, basically, to be able to like show, it's like, okay, can you prove yourself to be like this vessel for Marcos by being able to like do all these elaborate dance moves that at the same time are like violently like tethered and torturing this like other woman. And it feels kind of like you mentioned with like the strain that like dancing takes on people. Like I said, having, my past with like my sisters, they would always come back from dance lessons like tired, and it feels kind of like it's a weird sort of metaphor for like Johnson is putting any of that physical toll onto the Olga character, where it's like all the pain and torture that happens from like, especially like a dance academy like this, where it's even more arduous and strenuous on these poor women. And it just feels like it's another example of just like these cycles of power that we're referring to, where it's like, you're going to be a puppet for us to be able to get rid of somebody we don't like necessarily. You're going to be a tool for us so we can destroy this poor person who didn't have any kind of like thing beyond like, oh, I'm gotten tired of what's going on here. Nope, we got to get her out of here. Cut her out of the program. Yeah. In the most brutal way possible. And even the fact that Olga is like still alive after that is like so fucked up. And it's like that she's getting pierced with those giant fucking hooks as she's still like breathing and wheezing someone. Even that's the case with like after Mia Goth like collapses and she's being carried out, like that panting, that kind of like heavy breathing where you're just like, you can tell you're still in so much pain. No matter how many times you try and heal that up, it's going to still fuck with you on just a physical level. It just shows dancing's hard work. It gets people fucked up, especially when they're in part of a witch coven.
Yeah, and there's another sequence like I was mentioning, the jumping sequence where Tilda Swinton or Blanc is like, come on, Susie, jump higher. And then using her witchy powers, Blanc takes the jumping ability from one performer, gives it to Susie, and that performer whose jumping power gets taken away has like a seizure, gets taken away. Yeah, it's like, okay, yeah, like again, digging into this theme of like people in power, just like shifting their weight and giving it to somebody else, and other people have to suffer for that. So God, yeah, like even all those instances, like we mentioned, like that again, it plays into the physical toll of dancing, and like, hey, to be the best dancer, you gotta know a witch or two to be perfect. So yeah.
Yeah, and what I love also is the fact that despite the movie having these like upsetting political themes and like all of this horror that's going on, at the same time it leaves a lot of room for like the intimacy. Like, I love the friendship that kind of grows between Dakota Johnson and Mia Goth in this movie. It feels like it's a much more sincere, sort of genuine connection then like in the original it's very just kind of like flighty with those two characters. Here I feel the actual friendship that builds between them, and even just a moment where like I was watching this in the theater and I was stunned at like this, a cameo that actually gave me like chills, like how often cameos are just used for like very like fan servicey bait. The use of Jessica Harper as the wife of the older man character Tilda Swinton plays, who comes back and is like this vision who he thought he had lost in the war, and like all of a sudden she's there, even though we know it's a trick. Like, it's very clear, like, this isn't gonna end well for you, dude. Like, that's such a beautiful, intimate moment of them just, like, walking around. Almost feels like they're reliving their younger days as they're going through, like, the snowy Berlin. It's so beautiful and tragic, and it's a great use of Harper, who, like, at this time, had mostly been off screens for, like, the last 20 years or so. Like, before this, she was in Minority Report briefly, and then before that, it was like Todd Haynes' Safe in like the 90s. So like she was in very few movies in between here. And I love that she's also become like a weird Luca like company player, because she shows up in Bones and all, and she's like yeah, I love Harper ever since like Phantom of the Paradise or the original Suspiria, stuff like that. She fits perfectly in this role, and it feels like it's an actual good use of a cameo and actually giving an older actress like a chance to like do something really powerful and beautiful for this small limited role that she has.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it does feel like Luca does appreciate the original, regardless of what he does with like the material in his movie. Like, I think that cameo is like a nod to like, yes, guys, I know. It's like, here's one for the fans, but really, I'm going to do my own thing.
I mean, even down to like the fact that this movie has very little use of like primary colors, like the original did. Like the way this movie looks, you feel immersed in like sort of like ashen, kind of like the fall of like post World War II Berlin and all of the chaos that's there. It feels like it's gray, but not in a way that's like dull at the same time. It just feels like it's like muddy, and you feel that like coarseness and that like kind of lack of light and color that's there. And then like, even the color that you do get is like Dakota Johnson being like, I'm back, red tint, everyone's blowing up.
Yeah, definitely lack of neon in this, which I think works thematically in the movie. But also, can we talk about the score? Because
Thom Yorke.
My God. Okay. So I can't believe I've gone this far without bringing this up, but I love the score for this. I love the craziest shit Thom Yorke does in this. So much so that after I'd seen it 3 times and was pretty much did a 180, and like from hating it to like loving it. Part of the reason why it's stuck in my mind was the score. And before seeing it for a second time, I listened to the soundtrack and go, okay, yeah, I'll see this again. And then after loving it, I just played the soundtrack on repeat, and even played it as I was going to bed. So the Thom Yorke Suspiria soundtrack lulled me to sleep for several nights. Although I had to stop and kind of do like a condensed selection of the soundtrack, because there's literally one track on the Suspiria soundtrack by Thom Yorke that's just like screaming. That woke me up several times. And I go, what am I doing? I'm just going to take that out and just make my own playlist. But yeah, I love the score. And yeah.
And it's funny, then you tried it with the original Suspiria soundtrack from Goblin, and you were just like, I'm having nightmares constantly.
I'll say it was a genius choice to have Thom Yorke do the score. Again, to sort of not one up the original, but like have like the same sort of like just interesting choice, for a score, not being like super traditional. And yeah, I've heard criticism about how it's like it doesn't fit into the movie. It's like sort of I can't find the right word. People just maybe call it too silly to have Thom Yorke kind of like do his Thom Yorke stuff, in the middle of all this. But I don't know. I dig it. I dig those tracks, and I think it plays into what Luca does in a lot of his movies, where he mixes the soundtrack with what's going on screen and how well it plays. Because I think he does so exceptional with like these like unique musical artists, like pulling up a Thom Yorke, pulling up Reznor Ross for Bones and all, pulling up Sufjan Stevens for Call Me by Your Name, And I dig what he does overall, Luca. And this proves that he just understands, like, hey, I want a certain vibe for this movie. Gotta, go for the gut here. I gotta go with somebody who can bring their own unique musical style to this.
Well, yeah, and I completely disagree with, like, the idea that it doesn't work with this movie. I think it's a sort of interesting parallel to, like, the Goblin score from the original, which I love, but that's, like, so much more, like, upsetting and, like, has this, like, creepy, ethereal feel to it that's, like, deeply unsettling as you listen to, it while you're watching all these weird images that are coming on screen, as opposed to here, the Tom York score, I think, just adds this, like, additional layer of, like, melancholy that fits perfectly for this movie. And, like, even the choral stuff, it feels like it's definitely, like, Luca being like, okay, I don't want to just repeat the Goblin score for my movie. That wouldn't fit here, as opposed to, like, this kind of, like, beautiful, breathy vocalizations from Tom York, I think, fit beautifully with, like, this movie. It feels like it's in a similar kind of disparate, sad state that, like, the images feel like, and a lot of the performances feel like. It just all fits in a piece where it just, like, is so, like, sad and drained of life. And then when it does come to life, it's through horrific, awful life that you're just like, oh, it's like a zombie came back. Oh no, what's happening here? And I think that works perfectly. But you know what, Marcelo, we've talked a lot about Suspiria. We have a whole other movie to talk about. I know. So let's, any final thoughts you can muster up quickly about Suspiria 2015?
See, this is what happens when I come on a podcast and end up talking about one of my favorite movies of, like, the last 10 years. Because that's what this is. I thought about this as I was watching it today. It's like, yeah, and I did mention this earlier. It's a movie that I think perfectly captures the moment we're in now, even though it's set, like, in 1977, Germany. And I think about that a lot. And if I were to rank, the best movies of the 2010s now, it's like this would rank pretty high up. Because not only do the politics, like, still hold up, not only does that still affect me, but the movie itself, oh god, like everything we just said, performances, the production design, the sound, everything, god, I love it. It's about the vibes, and this very much is my vibe. So yeah, I love Suspiria 2018.
Yeah, I mean, I completely pretty much agree with all that. I think it's, like I said, I liked it when I first saw it, but I definitely was just like, I think I'll need to watch it a second time, and I just haven't until now for this particular episode. And yeah, I think it's one of the better, more interesting horror remakes out there for sure, where Luca Guadagnino clearly, like, loves the original movie, but at the same time does not want to remake it in terms of just, like, I want to recreate shots from it. I want to take a lot of, like, the vibes of almost what I felt while I was watching that movie and kind of put them into, like, my own story. And he said as much as it's kind of like the approach he took. I think that's a genius take on what to do, especially with such a, like, beloved classic original movie, is to kind of take, like, a lot of what you felt about it and, like, translate into a completely different story that still is, like, paying homage in certain ways to the original. And I think it's, like, such a great example of how to do that with, like, the score and the performances and everything. It feels definitely like one of the more fascinating examples of that. And also just as a dance movie, the dancing is, like, very, like, well choreographed, but also violent, and feels very appropriate for the movie that it's in the middle of, for sure. But let's talk about another dance-orific movie here with Breakin 2, Electric Boogaloo.
Party people in the place to be. This is what you've all been waiting to see. Electric Boogaloo, the ultimate show with Kelly, Ozone, and Turbo. Electric Boogaloo is breakdance too. Guess who? Electric Boogaloo's action dance, the best you'll get. If you like breakdance when you ain't seen nothing yet.
You lost your edge. Try me.
Electric Boogaloo's the greatest, nothing can compete. And once you've seen this movie, you'll believe in the beat.
I believe in the beat. When I'm dancing, it seems like everything's alright. I believe in the beat.
So don't miss it. Breakdance too. If you forget it, you'll regret it. Electric Boogaloo. A Golden Globus production. Another good one from Canon.
So Breakin 2 Electric Boogaloo came out December 19th, 1984, which is crucial because this is a sequel to the original Breakin, which came out May 4th, 1984. So the very quick turnaround of 7 months between the original being a pretty sizable hit and this sequel coming out. And this is obviously this is an 80s canon film. We love canon over here. I'm not sure, Marcelo. You love the canon filmography and all the silliness that comes out of that with your missing in actions and break-ins as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Quickly, I'll say I saw some canon films for the first time recently because I went to my theater's Albert Pune retrospective in January, and he's done a lot of great canon films. I'm totally on board with canon.
Yes, and this was unlike sort of the big action or horror things even that they were doing around this time. This is part of the breakdancing craze that was very popular at this point. And this is obviously, as I mentioned, a sequel to Breakin. Do you have any familiarity with the original Breakin at all? Were you lost at all the continuity? Barely transplanted from here to...
Where to begin? I had a little journey before watching this movie. Because I'm like, have I seen this before? So I went back to my Letterboxd because several years ago, my local theater that has this recurring weekly Weird Wednesday retrospective where every Wednesday they play a weird movie, right? I'm like, did I see Breakin' or Breakin' 2 at this Weird Wednesday 7 years ago? Turns out I haven't. What I did see was Rappin', the third entry in this series. And I'm going to tell you this, I have no memory of Rappin'. So I pretty much came into Breakin' 2 free and clear of any continuity, any canon. But yeah, I guess we should get into it now because I saw Breakin' 2 Electric Boogaloo for the first time. Not expecting much. Have only heard, I guess, the title has been made fun of for decades. Electric Boogaloo. Here and there, I've heard people say it's actually a good movie. I'm going to shout out Jacob DeNoble, co-host of Monsters Never Die on Talk Film Society. I had him on my podcast a few years ago. I did a series of, hey, tell me your top 25 movies of all time. And he had Breakin' 2, Electric Boogaloo, on his list. And I was kind of shocked. I'm like, wow, Jacob, this is an interesting choice. And he's like, yeah. So he went into why he loved it. I go, okay, all right, you've convinced me. I'm going to see this one day with an open mind. And that day came this past Saturday. And let me tell you, I had a good time. It's not the best movie in the world. I have several questions about the plots. Giant gaping holes in it. But overall, it's just a silly, fun dance movie that its main theme is let's destroy gentrification by any means necessary.
But mainly through dance. That's the big thing. Not any means necessary, but the main weapon against gentrification is dance.
By any means necessary to them is dance. I don't know where to even start really on why I like it so much. I think it's just because it just has that energy of we're just young kids here to dance. That's what the movie is. It's let's just connect these scenes they barely even connect together. There's barely even a plot to this. It's just yes, there's a big company trying to steamroll this youth center where they do all sorts of things in there, including dancing mostly. I think there's boxing in that youth center too.
Right, that's a secondary thing. The major thing at rec center is dance.
Is the dancing, right? But yeah, and they're like, oh, we got to raise money. I'm not even sure why
the money is basically to be able, because there's a whole thing where it's oh, this place isn't up to code. It hasn't been updated in several decades. So we have to raise $200,000 in order to upgrade it, but also we have to worry about this developer that's coming to try and destroy the place, and they're going to take advantage of that. Which is a weird thing where that plot point about the developer gets solved before the climax. So it's it's not even a factor anymore. It doesn't matter. But we still have to save the rec center from I guess some other person demolishing it by improving it or whatever. I don't know. It's the plot necessarily isn't the main driving force necessarily for this movie. Hate to spoil that for everybody, but
yeah, the plot itself gets muddled. It gets ahead of itself and kind of makes itself irrelevant by the last 10 minutes. So because it's all about the dancing. And that's why I'm on board. I mean, we have a sequence in this movie is a clear reference to Singing in the Rain, or a pre hat tip to Christopher Nolan's Inception, where I'm sure Nolan sat down and watched Breakin' 2 opening weekend. He goes, "Huh, I'm gonna steal this for a movie I'm gonna do several years in the future."
Well, before you keep going, I wanted to at least say my history.
Fine, okay, because hey, there's so much to talk about. Thomas,
we'll talk
take
about
it away.
For sure. Yes, but I wanted to say I had not seen Breakin' or Breakin' 2 until this past week or so. I watched the original Breakin', which is one very, not nearly as available as Breakin' 2 is. Support your local libraries, kids. But the original Breakin' feels like it's very much kind of like a slapdash thing to try and take advantage of this particular time with the fad of the breakdancing thing. And it's a very simple story just about the Lucinda Dickey character. Shout out was in these two movies and also a previous subject of the show, Ninja 3: The Domination, another great canon film, all in 1984. The queen of canon as far as I'm concerned, Lucinda Dickey. But in the original Breakin', she's just a rich girl who is studying ballet, and then she meets up with our two buddies here, Turbo and Ozone, played by Ozone is Shabadoo. Is the actor, his stage name, and Turbo is a Boogaloo Shrimp, and she meets up with those two, and she becomes sort of introduced to the idea of breakdancing and how oh, this feels like a legitimate sort of form of dance that people aren't appreciating because they're street toughs. But she tries to sort of legitimize it, and they all audition for this play with their breakdancing and all the stuffy shirts are just oh, this is actually great. We're gonna put you on Broadway, and they go on Broadway, and then at the opening of this movie, she's still on Broadway, and they're on the fucking street stuff. They didn't want to keep going with that career, I guess. Fine, but yeah. So I like the original Breakin'. It's just it's a very solid little movie for what it's trying to do, basically. And then Breakin' 2, is a fascinating fever dream of a movie where when you watch a dance movie, there tend to be dance sequences, there'll be breaks and stuff in between dance sequences. Every dance sequence kind of bleeds into the other one. There's never really a point where they stop dancing necessarily. It's there are very few moments of plot, and it's mostly just kind of all right, we're going to do our big dance number, and then maybe a minute where we talk to each other, and then another big dance number, and then another one, and another one. And I found that very infectiously charming for what it was. I agree with you that I picked this as a bad pick just out of blind curiosity, because everyone makes fun of the title and all this other stuff, but it's a very earnest, optimistic, silly, dumb movie that I was totally on board for every single weird, silly decision it makes, where I'll just say it. This movie purports not only can dancing stop gentrification, but it can heal the sick. It can make you fall in love instantly with others. And even the opening of this movie, where after everyone's accepted breakdancing here, it's a utopian society where we don't actually fight each other. So there's no violence. Everyone just breakdances. There's the point where Kelly comes back, the Special K, as her character's nickname is, Lucinda Dickey's character, comes back to the neighborhood, and everyone's yeah, Kelly, what's up? Yeah, I'm so glad you're here. Let's dance down the street. Everyone's breakdancing. Even the mailman's breakdancing, and the telephone pole guy, an old lady, they're all breakdancing together. It's this is utopia. This is beautiful. Why are we all breakdancing?
Yeah, exactly. I want to live in this world where all of a sudden I can dance on the ceiling, okay? Where I'm in a hospital, I feel bad, but then everybody in the hospital starts dancing for no reason.
And then you're cured of your ailment. You start boogalooing. Oh, shit.
Oh, God.
I don't have cancer anymore, everybody. I'm free.
It's isn't there literally a scene where somebody is in a wheelchair, everybody's dancing around him, and then he just gets up, throws down, and he's oh, I can walk again. It's incredible. This movie is incredible because it's such a fantasy of this world where it's just nothing but dance, where dancing can save the world, and it literally does save these kids' lives, because this community center that is for some reason everybody wants to shut down because they want to build a mall, and it's just so forward thinking, and yeah, we need to help the youth here. It's in order to help the youth, we have to have them dancing. That's what's going to give us all a better life. World peace can be achieved through dancing. That's the main message here. That's why I'm this movie, I'm with Roger Ebert, because Roger Ebert gave this movie 3 out of 4 stars. God, he was so smart. Roger Ebert. So I think he was ahead of the curve here, because I don't know why this movie became such a joke. I think is my main point. I don't know why. Maybe just because it bombed, right? And maybe the title was silly.
Well, it didn't do too bad. I mean, like, it's a classic canon thing of it cost $3 million, made $15 million. But I think it's just a problem of, like, it because of, like, what it transparently is for canon, which is, like, kids are breakdancing. Golden Globes are just like, the kids breakdance. We gotta make 2 movies. Especially where this one, once again, came out 7 months after the first one did. It's just like, oh, this is a cash grab, and it's like a silly name, we can kind of ignore it. But I think time has been very kind. I agree to this movie, because as, like, silly and bright and dumb as it is, I think it still has, like we mentioned, like, these very positive sort of messages about just, like, hey, let's actually, like, give back to the community so we can, like, have kids, like, you know, have some kind of positivity in their lives. And that is done through breakdancing, and especially where you have, like, not just, like, our two, but Turbo and Ozone, who are, like, very fun together, but also just weird side characters like that motherfucking mime dude who's just there and he just, like, breakdances with everybody. He doesn't say a word, just like, fuck yeah, mime dude. Like, I get the same joy I get out of something else I'll talk about a bit more in the show later, put a pin in it, but the Step Up movies, where those movies are very silly and also trying to get in on a trend with sort of, like, the specific kind of dancing of that time and, like, the late 2000s, early 2010s, but they're all very sincere and joyful and about just, like, let's build a community by dancing. So it's like, it's silly, but it's like, it's very sweet and sincere.
I find it a hard movie to talk about because really we've covered it. I think it's a movie where people dance and have fun. The end. Go watch it. There are sequences that, again, like the hospital sequence,
right, which I want to set up a bit for anybody out there who hasn't seen this movie, that, like, there's a certain point where the Turbo character gets chased down by, like, a couple dudes. Right, and, like, as he's being chased down, he, like, tries to diverge away from them, and then he falls down a huge flight of stairs.
That scene.
So then they all go to the hospital, and she's comatose. He's like, comatose, and, like, everyone's like, oh, God, can he get up? And his love interest, who he's been trying to romance this whole time, kisses him on the lips, and immediately he starts breakdancing back from consciousness, and everyone joins in, and the entire hospital dances with him. Like, nurses come out and dance along. There's a guy who's dying on the surgery table. The doctors start dancing, and then that guy comes to life and starts dancing with everybody else.
By the way, okay, all of that is insane in a good way. I will say one little moment that kind of just threw me for a loop, very small, is, like, before all that happens, we're in this hospital room, like, his friends are around him, worried, and his love interest just walks out of a closet for no reason. It's like, what? I don't. It's like, what world are they living in? Where the main language to them is dance, and also, like, a person can just transport through, like, space just by going through a closet door. I don't know. It's a choice, but it's a choice I love, because what other movie will make that choice of, like, okay, the director just is thinking out loud, it's like, I don't want her to just walk through the hospital door. Let's just have her be in the closet and just come out. No reason for it. Nobody will address it. Just do it.
It's this weird magical realism that's, like, once again, really infectious. It feels like it's very much like a long music video. It just, like, leads from one sort of music video-y sequence to the next. Where it just, and even the fact that, like, this magical sort of dance stuff is, like, actually taking place within the world. Like, there's the bit we kind of reference, kind of like the famous centerpiece of this movie, where we have the Turbo character does a breakdance in a rotating room, and he goes, like, onto the ceiling and stuff like that. It's this, like, great moment that initially you think, like, oh, this is like a, you know, a film representation of him, like, falling for this girl, and it's like, nope, she walks in and sees him dancing on the ceiling, which I just love. Also, there's that shot where, like, it's still rotating, like, in the way, like, I believe this was the same rotating room from Nightmare on Elm Street, which is just, like, wrap production and stuff, so they, like, borrowed that particular thing. And I just love that, like, there's a shot of him still dancing on the ceiling, and she's on the ground, and it looks very clear like that poor actress is, like, harnessed it in to this rotating room, and is not comfortable with this, but she's just like, oh wow, he's dancing, and she's just like, am I gonna fucking die? All the blood's rushing to my head.
She's a trooper, because that scene, I think it works very well, because every performer in this movie, they're committed. They can dance. Like, I was speaking earlier about how the act of dancing, in my opinion, sometimes people just gloss over it, But God, like all credit to the dancers / actors in this. I mean, they may be the best dancers, may not be the best actors, but really, who cares? Like, they're great dancers. And in the sequence where he's dancing on the ceiling, like, it's just another great, performance from this actor. And I'm with you. Like, her coming in and just being part of that sequence. And again, she doesn't go, "Why are you dancing on the ceiling?" She just watches it, watches the performance, and like falls in love with the guy. And we're just like, all right, this is it. Again, like you were saying, Thomas, this is basically a feature-length music video where there are no rules. It's its own little world. But I'm into it. I dig it. It's like moments like that, I'm like, you know what? I don't need anybody to address this. I'm glad it's not like very winky, like a wink to the camera. I don't think it really does that. And I appreciate that. It's just very much committed to the bit of like, yes, we're in a strange world where dance is the one and only thing we do, and we can like break the rules of a normal, physical world.
Right, and what I like also is the fact that I agree with you, like, that not necessarily they're all great actors, but they're all very, like, whatever they have lack in, like, actual acting ability, there's a lot of charm to them.
Yeah.
I think particularly Ozone and Turbo are, like, they were charming, I think, in the first movie. And in the second movie, there's a lot more of that, where especially, like, Turbo, like the Michael Chambers Boogalo shrimp, was, like, 17 in these movies. And he looks young. He looks like a 13-year-old. Like, I'm just like, kid, you should be in school. Why are you out here on the street dancing? But he's like, him and Ozone are like so charming together. They have that sort of like younger brother, older brother chemistry that really works. Especially in like a scene I was not prepared for, where Turbo's talking to Ozone about like, hey, how do I impress a girl? It's like, oh, you gotta like come up to her and then you start pulling the moves. And then he dances with like this weird doll who's made up to kind of look like Kelly. They start dancing. Ozone and Turbo like take turns dancing with the doll, and occasionally they'll cut in between, like, Ozone is dancing with the doll, and all of a sudden he's dancing with Kelly, or then all of a sudden he's dancing with the love interest for Turbo.
Yeah.
And then Turbo's like, hey man, let me dance too. And then like they both get like really hung up on dancing with the doll, and then they like fight over it, and then they break the doll, and they're like, oh fuck it, let's dance with each other. It's like it's such a weird sequence, but like it's super charming because those two are like having fun together doing this dumb bit.
Okay, yeah, I'm glad you brought this up. I apologize to listeners because I almost forgot about this scene. It's, I dare say, brilliant, but also I am in agreement it's very weird. Because I think the idea of it, the concept of it, I think is genius. I'm saying that right now. That sequence is genius in concept. The execution, I'm not 100% sure about, but I love that they just are committed to it. They're just like, yes, that idea of like dancing with this doll that turns into the two, distinct love interests for these two dudes. The editing in that is like, it's so good. Like as it edits between, two real people and a doll, and then that choice of the doll blowing up and them dancing together. Yeah, sure. Again, another moment where it feels like, yes, this whole movie does feel like a journal of like a music video director who's like, all right, I have this idea for a music video. And he's just like, you know what? I'm going to do this movie instead and put all these ideas on screen. And that sequence does very much feel like that. And again, another sequence where I'm like, I don't care about the real world here. I care about this fantasy. And that's another aspect of it. It's like this, it's such a nice little fantasy that they're living into, of like this love story. At one point it's like a love triangle. Like I didn't realize that's another aspect. Like Kelly has a fiance, which is weird. That doesn't come up until like the third act.
It's a weird thing where like I guess like the mom tries to introduce him as the fiance, but she's like, I don't like that dude, he's a creep. So I think it's more she's trying to say like, oh no, she's off limits to you riffraff.
Okay, yeah,
because they're going to like the dinner, which I love that scene too, where Ozone and Turbo, or it's just like Turbo has like his mouth full of like the food and stuff like that. Very funny, like comedic scene there. But yeah, it's a weird thing where like in the original two, like Kelly and Ozone have some kind of flirtation. And it doesn't feel like, okay, maybe they're going to be like friends by the end of this. Then when she comes back to Ozone, they have like a makeout session briefly. But then it feels like they aren't actually a couple after that. It's so weird what they're trying to imply about like their relationship. Especially when that other woman comes in just like, you stay away from Ozone. You're not allowed around here. But I think also a credit to like Lucinda Dickey, I think fits in perfectly. Everybody, where like she's dancing along with everybody, making it work, especially for sequences like another great one that I kind of referenced earlier. the under the bridge dance fight is so good.
Oh, yeah.
Where like this competing like group, like this guy who like keeps like who's sort of like the rival for Ozone, keeps coming up to him just like, oh, you're gonna step up to me? What are you gonna do, punk? Yeah, what? And then they have like a dance fight where like they're like dancing aggressively at each other, and there's a point where like Lucinda, Dicky, and Ozone and everybody pull up trash can lids and like shield themselves from the dancing. It's so fun.
It is fun, and it's clear that they're doing like a West Side Story hat tip, but God, it's just executed so in their own way, in such a straight 80s dance movie sort of way, where I think there's no other way to do it than this, and pull it off and have it be in a movie called Breakin 2. And like, yes, this
Electric Boogaloo.
Electric Boogaloo.
So you can't forget that subtitle.
I'm sorry. I mean, folks listening to this podcast right now who haven't seen this, I mean, for God's sakes, if we haven't told you already, because it's just scene after scene like that in this movie. I don't think there's a scene in this movie that doesn't have something going on, which I think is its greatest strength. Like, good or bad, something is going on that will interest you. I was watching this at my parents' place, and I had distractions around me. But, you know, as I was like, you know, talking to like my mom on the side, I went back to the movie. I go, I'm going to rewind this. I need to focus up. I need to pay attention to every single detail that's happening in this movie, because there's so much going on in every single scene. Again, if that doesn't sell you, like, I'm glad this movie isn't boring at all, really. I can't think of like a dull moment, because again, there's something always going on, which I do appreciate.
Yeah, even when it's not like actual any dancing, just certain plot developments are so funny to me. Like the whole thing with Kelly's parents, where like initially they're just like, oh, I don't like what she's doing, that dance and stuff. It's gonna completely screw over her future. And then by the end, like they're watching them do like the finale on TV, and they're like, you know what? Those kids stand for something. I appreciate it. Here's the check. They'll get you the last thing over so you guys can like save the rec center.
Which is like, okay, it's a moment that I think is so, like, of course it's going to happen. Like in any movie like this, of course, you think like, yeah, the parents are in the end going to go, you know what? You're right, kid. Here you go. But the way it plays out, I was like fully invested. I'm like, oh my God, are they going to do it? Are they going to pull this off? Is the dad going to give them a check at the end? He does. Yes. Yes. I was literally...
Look, I mean, I had to. They had so much choreography, and they changed outfits so much. Turbo was in traction, and he just got here.
See, dancing changes the world. Like, dancing can change anybody's opinion. It changed that dad's opinion, so... Oh, God. And it changed my opinion. Hey, I apologize for prejudging Breakin 2 Electric Boogaloo for so long without seeing the movie. And now seeing the movie, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to sing its praises. Like, anytime somebody says this is not a good movie, I go, hey, come on, okay? I've seen worse, much worse movies. At least, again, there's something going on in this that is...
You're going to challenge them to a dance fight if they say
100%. 100%, Thomas.
Get out your trash can lid, motherfucker. It's on.
I'm calling anybody out. If anybody wants to challenge me on this, I will dance off with them. Okay, I will dance off to the best of them. So yeah, that's my challenge here on this podcast.
A call to action.
Call to action.
Yeah, I mean, the only other thing I wanted to spotlight is sort of the weird connecting thread of all three of these movies, where apparently he's also in Rappin', but young Ice-T showing up in Rappin', which is pretty fucking great. Where he just shows up and he's just like, everybody's gonna be all right, and then it's just like very classic, like very early rap, but he's like really embracing it very charmingly. Yeah, and it's just, I don't know, is there any other thing we haven't pointed out about this, Marcelo, you want to shout out? Some other detail?
I mean, I'm sure, okay, it's not necessarily something, it just stuck in my mind that it's just, an odd choice that I'm like, huh? And I'm like, okay, fine. And this is very small. I don't even know why I'm bringing it up, but like there's a scene where Kelly and I think Ozone are just eating pizza, and he has a shirt off as they eat pizza, just on the ground. And I'm like, okay. They're still in the courting phase of their relationship, and like he's like, you know what? I'm not gonna put a shirt on to eat pizza. Screw that. Let's just sit on the floor and eat pizza too.
Even though once again, I don't know if by the end of this movie they're actually a couple. It's just a weird thing with like their relationship, where it's just like we're friends, but we'll eat pizza shirtless together, I guess. I don't know.
And as we wrap up, I do, again, going back to Roger Ebert's review of this, 3 stars out of 4. I want to read this, and this can be just my closing thought on it. I'm going to read the last paragraph of his review, okay? Electric Boogaloo is not a great movie, but is inexhaustible, entertaining, and may turn out to be influential. It could inspire a boomlet of low-priced movie musicals, movies not saddled with multi-million-dollar budgets, Broadway connections, and stars who are not necessarily able to sing and dance. And at a time when movie musicals, as opposed to movie soundtracks, are seriously out of touch with the music that is really being played and listened to by teenagers, that could be a revolutionary development. So imagine that. Imagine if, like, the trend continued. Because I know it kind of fizzled out after this, right, Thomas? Like, the whole era of breakdancing movies. But, man, if it continued on through, like, the 80s, the 90s... Yeah, I mean, it did kind of like come back in the early 2000s, which I think we'll talk about later. But God, I mean, this movie, it's of its time, but that's not a bad thing. I think it captures that moment really well, and you can see it as a time capsule. But I can see it as like a movie that I wish people nowadays would gravitate towards and say we should make movies as insane as this, as daring. I should say as this. So yeah, that's my thoughts overall on seeing Breakin' 2 Electric Boogaloo for the first time.
Yeah, I mean, I was in a similar boat where I did prejudge this movie, just kind of like, oh, it's like a silly breakdancing movie. I'm sure that'll be fun for our dance movies episode to kind of like make fun of and point at, and you can make fun of it. It's very silly and very over the top and weird, but in a way that's, like we said, like very charming and, more importantly, so sincere. I think that's the thing that like really like made me like go along with it. Like, I love a big, sincere, silly musical kind of thing like this, where, like we mentioned, where everybody's in, like, every extra has some kind of like big dance moment, and you're like, you know what, you go, mailman who did like a fucking cartwheel over there to like everybody else. Like, it's like I said, it's this fantasy kind of idea where it's just like breakdancing can like unite everybody, and if everyone were just to like, you know, dance around and have fun together, we wouldn't be as divided as we are. And I think that's why it's kind of a bummer. Like, I haven't mentioned this yet because admittingly I don't know how much air I should give this, but the fact that the Electric Boogaloo not only has become like the sort of like sequel subtitle joke where everyone makes like blank 2 Electric Boogaloo, but that weirdly evolved into like some dumb far right assholes taking Electric Boogaloo as like a thing. That disappoints me so much after seeing this, because like this movie is like so against any of that kind of like bullshit that's like from dumb far right groups, because like this is like everybody can be in a utopia if we just fucking dance together. And it's like, you know what, that's the future I want. That's what I want for the children of tomorrow.
Yeah,
everybody dances and nobody judges each other for bullshit reasons.
Yeah,
and
we have to take this back. We have to take this title.
We gotta
back.
take Electric Boogaloo back. Yes, Electric Boogaloo belongs to all people, not assholes who fucking co-opted like pieces of shit. Fuck those guys. But now, Marcelo, we gotta move on to the weekly segment, the Double Redo. Double Redo.
Double redo. Double redo. Double redo. Double redo. Double redo.
That works. So the Double Redo is a segment that we usually like doing on this show every week, where in collaboration with the topic, where we have our good and our bad pick that we cover for most of the show, we also have some recommendations for, a good movie related to the topic we would recommend to everybody, and then a bad one we would steer you clear of. I'm going to be going first here with my good pick for dance movies. Is one of, I mentioned this franchise earlier, and I feel like it's one of the great sort of like descendants of Breakin' 2 Electric Boogaloo. It is one of the Step Up films, but specifically Step Up 3D. Now, these were movies I also was like kind of vaguely aware of. I'd seen like the original Step Up with Channing Tatum, speaking of Magic Mike, and Step Up 2 he has a cameo in. I'd seen those two when I was younger, and I wasn't fans of them. And even watching them fairly recently, I remember, like, the first 3 right before John M. Chu's recent directorial effort, In the Heights, came out, because he directed 2 and the 3rd film in the franchise. I was kind of, like, cynical of those back in the day. But now, especially watching 2 and then 3, I was just fully on board with, like, what we were kind of mentioning about Breakin' 2, where, like, these are very sincere, sweet, dumb movies that kind of just like are barely put together by scotch tape so the dance sequences can happen. And in the case of Step Up 3D, it was originally released in 3D, it goes fully into bizarre, fascinating territory where like there's underground like dance battles that go on. We mainly follow this Moose character who was in the second movie as a supporting character, but is now kind of the lead as he's moved on to college and is trying to like balance out his engineering studies with his dancing hobby, and he's like trying to decide which avenue he's going to go down necessarily. And in the case of Step Up 3D, he literally winds up with like a weird Professor Xavier type guy who's recruiting dancers for his crew, and he has a whole layer that has like boom boxes all around, and there are all these different dancers that have specific abilities. Like there's a twins who like dance and do like synchronized dancing with each other. There's a guy who is literally like a robot. Like he dances the robot, but also he doesn't talk and he doesn't have any kind of like real human attributes. He just moves around like a robot even when he's not dancing. It's so bizarre, but it's like I said, it's all very charming. The dance sequences are so well shot. John M. Chu, I think, is one of the underrated sort of directors, especially of like big sort of dance and musical elements. I think he's phenomenal at. And in this movie, just dance battle after dance battle happens, and they're all like so well choreographed. And it's a movie that like I didn't see in 3D as originally intended. I would love to see it in 3D. I hope Avatar: The Way of Water, its big success allows for 3D re-releases of some of these movies I didn't get to see in theaters theatrically in 3D. Particularly this one, I think would be such a blast to watch. There's like a whole water sequence. Speaking of Way of Water, where like everybody like starts doing like popping and locking routines while like the place is kind of flooding basically. It's so good. It's so charming and it's so silly, but in a way that like I fully embrace and love. And then my bad pick is a movie that was a sequel to a much beloved dancing movie of the 70s, where you had Saturday Night Fever starring John Travolta, and several years later they made a sequel called Staying Alive, which, if you don't know, follows John Travolta's character as he's moved on from being like, a street tough who's out there dancing at disco clubs into dancing on Broadway. And it's interesting for many reasons. One, this is the directorial debut of Sylvester Stallone. And it's a very weird thing where like he's trying to make it on Broadway, but it's a lot of stuff where he's like trying to romance a woman, but also he's too deep into his dancing, which all the music, also speaking of Stallone, is done by Frank Stallone. And it's all like very silly machismo songs that are in there. I kind of think it borders on good bad kind of thing with this movie at certain points, but I think it's too long and there are much more boring stretches in between to make it like I would say sort of like a good fun bad watch necessarily. But it's so bizarre as a weird cultural object that I'm kind of like fascinated by it for all the reasons I've been talking about. Staying Alive is not quite a Saturday Night Fever for sure. That one obviously has a lot more of a particularly better use of its dancing abilities of its performers, versus Staying Alive is a bit more of like a weird, bizarre myth that doesn't need to exist at all. But it does have, I think, I can't remember if this is the very end of the movie or not, but it's this bit where like he finally woos the girl. She's like, so what are you going to do now that you've won the part and won the girl? And he just is like, strut. And then he struts down the street to Staying Alive.
Oh no. Oh no.
It's so silly, but not quite in the fun silly, I would argue, that Step Up 3D is.
Well, I haven't seen either movie. I've been interested to see Staying Alive because I kept hearing it's like maybe an interesting bad movie, but I don't know. I definitely need to see the Step Up movies. I haven't seen any of the Step Up movies. Tremendous blind spot for me. So I need to dig into those for sure.
I would definitely recommend, especially as 4 is Step Up Revolution is literally about like a group of dancers who do flash mobs in order to like disrupt the police.
Okay, I'm in.
And it's
say no more.
And then 5 is literally like it's like Fast 5, where like everybody comes back, like except for Channing doesn't come back, but like Brianna Evigan from the second movie and like all the other protagonists like come back for like one big dance reality show battle thing. It's so fucking silly.
I need to watch all of these. I do.
But Marcelo, what about your picks? For
Yes. Let me do the bad one first. Get that one out of the way. The bad dance movie I picked was maybe the most unsettled I've been at a movie. Talk about the movie Cats here. Okay. The sequence in particular, I'm just going to It's not a shadow. I'm just going to just hyper focus on this sequence that really chilled me to the bone. In Cats, the movie directed by Oscar winner Tom Hooper, there's a scene where Rebel Wilson, as Jenny Annie Dots, the Gumble Cat,
Right, as we all know.
It should go without saying. She dances in the sequence with cockroaches. I don't know what else to say. It's disturbing. I hate it. I saw this movie once in a theater, and that was enough for me. And I'm a huge defender of Hooper's Les Miserables. Okay, so if anything, I was going to be the person to say, hey, Cats is good. But no, in no way and form is Cats good. Okay, it's bad. Should not exist. The dancing in it in particular is bad. Does not connect to the story at all. Bad movie. Bad. That's all I can say about Cats. Moving on. The good choice. Of course, I had to pick Magic Mike. There was no other way around it, okay? Let me talk about Steven Soderbergh's Magic Mike. Soderbergh, my favorite film director. I went longest time, not seeing Magic Mike. Like, for whatever reason. I mean, at this point, when I was doing my podcast, Soderbergh 2828, with Mike Schindler, we were going through Soderbergh's filmography in order. And when we got to Magic Mike, I'm like, oh, Magic Mike, blind spot for me when it comes to Soderbergh. I'll finally watch it. And this was before I really had this realization where I'm like, there are movies I just haven't seen that I should see and like don't see for, it being a musical or a dance movie. I mean, that's why I think I haven't seen any Step Up movies, because like those came out at a time when I was just like flat out refusing to see them. And I finally saw Magic Mike, and I'm like, oh God, yes, this movie is actually amazing. It's like, not only does it have like amazing dance sequences, not only do you see like going back to performers I admire for their dance abilities, like Channing Tatum, if there was any question of like him being a star, after seeing Magic Mike, I'm like, oh yeah, Channing Tatum in the right role, in the right movie, like he can excel. In talking to people about Magic Mike, sort of like trying to convince them to see it, I may say something like, yeah, it's kind of like an after-school special, but it's an after-school special shot by Steven Soderbergh. Because yes, like Magic Mike, meets with the kid played by Alex Pettyfer, who is like kind of like an audience surrogate in this world of male stripping. And yeah, of course, the kid falls into the traps you see in these sorts of movies where like he uses the money from dancing to buy drugs, and like he loses control, and Channing Tatum's Magic Mike, it tries to help him out, and Mike falls in love with like the kid's sister, and like sure, yada yada yada. It's so well made though. It's like, I'll give it that. It's such an excellent movie when it comes to the craft, and also I think it's smart when it focuses more on the Magic Mike character. I feel for him when like his plot, his through line for the movie is him just trying to make it on his own, like start his own business, but he can't do it because he's just tied down because of the world of male stripping. It's like that whole like judging something on the face of it. I like that this movie faces that head on. But yeah, I think it says a lot of smart things. Even though yes, I may say it's like an after school special. It's a smartly made after school special, and that's why I think I like XXL a little bit more, because it kind of like tosses away those heavier themes and becomes like a much more fun movie. But hey, I mean, before you get to XXL, you gotta experience the first one. So yeah, that's my good pick for this. It's Magic Mike, the first one.
Yeah, I have seen both of your picks. We've talked about Cats on here on the show previously, so I won't go too far into that. But I do find Cats to at least be a fascinating bad movie. It is one of those where it's just like, I can't believe this happened. And I will say, there's a great dance sequence in that movie, which is a Skimbleshanks the Railway Cat doing his dancing down the railroad. I would argue is an amazing dance number from that tap dancer guy whose name I can't remember that played that particular cat. But at the same time, it is largely just a bizarre fascinating, over budget, terrible mess that I'll say this much: I'd rather watch Cats more than like any other Tom Hooper movie again.
Yeah, you know what? Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
There are other ones I think might be better technically, like The King's Speech is technically a better movie, but I don't know. I want to see Skimbleshanks again. I don't see fucking Colin Firth doing any tap dancing down the railroad in that fucking movie. But then Magic Mike, as I mentioned, I rewatched both the Magic Mikes recently just in prep for his last dance. And I will say that I think the original Magic Mike is fascinating because it was definitely one of those, like, it was marketed totally on just like, there are hot dudes that are stripping down and dancing. And I remember the weird phenomenon of that. Like, I went to see something else around that same summer, like when it was out. It was one of the rare times in my life I've actually seen lines around a theater building to see a movie with fucking Magic Mike, which I did not see in the theater, but I would see later at home, and I found quite interesting, especially because, like, I would just equate it to like an after-school special, and it feels a lot more like a lot of those like kind of intimate 70s dramas where like it has more in common with like Midnight Cowboy than it does like a traditional kind of like, oh, like a fun sort of like everybody, like these guys are like taking their shirts off kind of strip movie. And I think that's what is fascinating about it. I get why that kind of was sort of polarizing amongst some people, particularly the women who were just like, I always want to see them be hot. I don't care about like their drug problems.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I found a lot of that investing. It feels kind of like you see the glitz of them on stage and then like the kind of behind the scenes turmoil. I found like pretty engrossing. I think especially with like how Matthew McConaughey goes from like being the typical, just like I see a lot of lawbreakers out here, to being kind of like a Machiavellian monster man.
Yeah.
As like the movie goes along, and I find that fascinating. But if anything, like my only real trouble with that movie is Alex Pettyfer's a fucking terrible actor. He always has been. And he really is just like, the movie only works well because of like Tatum and everybody else kind of around him.
Exactly.
Trying to like lift up his lesser spirits. Like even, I was a lot harder on Cody Horn when I first saw this, who plays the love interest. Now it's just like, well, at least she feels like a bit more down to earth and natural. As opposed to like, Pettyfer looks like he's angry to be in the movie. And it's like, fine, dude. Fuck you.
I will say, I'm glad you mentioned Cody Horn, because like she has this sort of thing that I think I like about like Soderbergh's direction. Okay, yeah, she has this unusual way about her in Magic Mike, right? Where I'm not gonna say she's a bad actress, but she just maybe feels too natural of a performer.
I mean, what to me it feels like she's like off-brand Kristen Stewart.
Yeah,
like not necessarily in a bad way, but
Yeah.
just like I can get Kristen Stewart at my local supermarket, so I'll get my Cody Horn instead.
But see, like with the direction by Soderbergh, like I think back to like the Girlfriend Experience, or like Haywire, or like particular we shouldn't talk about Haywire, but whatever. Girlfriend Experience.
What are you talking about? There's so many great people in the movie, and just a black void who plays the lead character, right?
But that's kind of my thing about it. Like Soderbergh does like blank voids. Not to say let me just jump ahead here. Not to say Sasha Grey in Girlfriend Experience is a blank void, but she's not like, actress that.
He casts untraditional actors.
Thank you. Yeah. So that's why I think I appreciate Cody Horn in the movie, although I don't think she's like the best actress. So that's my, semi defense of her in that movie.
And I'll also say people were decrying the whole thing about like, why does everything look like piss yellow with like the color filter? I will say, as someone who was born and raised in Tampa Bay, I can tell you. That is the way it fucking looks like at certain points. That kind of like piss yellow filter captures the vibe, I will say, of Tampa.
And also, I'll say this. I don't think I've ever said this on my Steven Soderbergh podcast, but Steven Soderbergh, as a cinematographer, loves that piss yellow. He loves that look. And I'm like, hey, I'll buy into it because you're my favorite filmmaker. Otherwise, yeah, I totally agree. Like, in a lot of his movies, he does tend to go that way, which I'm like, I've made my peace with it.
You'll take that golden shower from Steven anytime, any day.
Let me be on record to say, yes, I will take that golden shower by Steven Soderbergh.
Steven, call him. Or Peter Andrews, or one of your other aliases if you don't want anybody to connect.
Peter, go ahead.
Well, on that note, let's repeat our titles briefly from the double review in case you're curious to see either of our films. My good choice was Step Up 3D, and my bad choice was Staying Alive.
Yeah, so my good choice was Magic Mike, and my bad choice was Cats.
Yes, and we'll be doing our picking for next week's episode at the end of this, so stay tuned for that. But we want to thank some people before we get out of here. We want to thank Chris Oliver for the intro and outro music used for our show. Listen to more of his music at chrisoliver.bandcamp.com. Thanks to Christian Thor Lally for our artwork. Find him at Night of Water, that's night with a K, _of_water, at various socials for all his great stuff. And thanks, of course, to our Patreon supporters at patreon.com/DEDBpod, where for just $1 a month, you all get to do stuff like vote in polls for individual movies or topics that we cover for the show. And you also get access to bonus podcasts that we put out there, like at least one a month, including at some point later in February, Adam and I, he'll take a brief break from his hiatus to come on and do our award show that we're going to be doing a first annual version of The Dubs, which is our dumb award show title that we came up with from the movies from 2022 that we wanted to honor. We got like Best Actress, Best Actor, like all that stuff. We'll be doing awards for that. And while I'm talking about the patrons, over there at patreon.com/DEDBpod, we do have a call to action that's currently up and about, if you're listening to this on the week that it's come out. Basically, next month, our big bonus podcast is going to be our usual March Madness bracket face-off, where we have 32 choices that face off against each other with a panel of folks that we've selected. It's Adam, myself, and 3 other guests who will be on there, and we'll be debating the best animated film for our March Madness bracket. So, 32 choices will face off against each other in that sort of March Madness bracket order until we eventually crown the winner, which is official, no kind of doubt about it. But the thing is, every year we do that, we have each of our guests and Adam and myself select 6 choices each, which totals to 30, but we always leave 2 choices open for the patrons to suggest choices for. So over there at patreon.com/DEDBpod, you have from now until it's February 10th at midnight Eastern Standard Time to make your suggestion, and it might end up being selected. We'll credit you on the show if it ends up being selected, and we'll 2 choices from the patrons will end up being facing off in this big March Madness competition. And of course, I also want to thank our lovely guest Marcelo for being on the show. Marcelo, thank you so much for coming on. What do you want to plug out there for everybody?
All right, where do I even begin? Talkfilmsociety.com. Go there. You're listening to this. Double Edge Double Bill. We host that on the website. You can also find Monsters Never Die. You can find It Pod to Be You. And you can find the flagship Talk Film Society podcast, where right now me and Marcus Irving are doing a series on award season 2022. We're doing a weekly show leading up to the Oscars, and also hyping up the Talk Film Society Awards, the 10th annual Talk Film Society Awards. The voting is open. The nominees have been announced. Go to talkfilmsociety.com/TFS Awards to vote. Look at the nominees. Have fun. And patreon.com/talkfilmsociety, where Marcus and I do commentaries. And hey, as of this recording on the Patreon now, Thomas Mariani joined Marcus and I to talk over Malignant, and we had a good time. So listen to that right now. Go do it. But that's it. Plugs. And of course, Soderbergh 2828, the podcast series I do with Mike Schindler, that's coming back. We're going to eventually talk about Magic Mike's Last Dance. So Mike and I have to figure out when we're going to do that, but it's going to happen. I'm excited. Every time Soderbergh does a movie, we come back to do a podcast. So that means about once or twice a year we do it. So I have a good time. So that's it. Thank you, by the way, Thomas, for having me on.
No problem, boss man.
Okay.
But yeah, and I had a lot of fun in that Malignant commentary. We talked about the movie for some of it, which is new, which is a bit different from most of your other commentaries. You kind of diverge away from doing that. But no, that was a lot of fun. And of course, also with Talk Film Society, a bunch of the other hosts have been guests on here. Like Marcus was a guest. The real Matt C was, of course, a guest for us as well. Manish, Pod to Be You, a bunch of people from the Talk Film Society family. We're all part of one big happy family where we all break dance down the street. That's what Marcelo makes us do.
Exactly. That's what I'm doing right now. I'm breakdancing. So you can't see it, but I'm doing it.
Well, for more of our show, you can find us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at DEDBpod. You can also submit feedback, like your own double redo choices and such, to our email, doubleedgedoublebill@gmail.com, all spelled out. And you can find me on Twitter and Letterboxd at NotTheWho'sTommy. I also do some writing at marianithomas.wordpress.com and at film-cred.com. And for more of the show, subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and other podcasting platforms. If you're listening on Talk Film Society, why not listen to all the other great shows that are there on the network that Marcelo mentioned a bit earlier? And you can also dig into the archives in our Podbean main feed for like over 200 episodes before you even joined TFS. And if nothing else, if you can't support us on the Patreon, it's totally cool. The free way to help myself and also all the other shows with Talk Film Society out is to rate, review, or simply share the shows around. It gives us more visibility out there in the ether. But now, it's time we did our picking for next week. As we usually like to do every week, Adam and I usually have 2 good and 2 bad picks. I'll keep in mind that even though Adam is on his hiatus, he has sent me his bad picks for the upcoming episode. That'll be a thing. Even when he's not on the show, he's still submitting whatever other choices I don't have. So I had the 2 good choices, and Adam had the 2 bad choices, and we assign them usually number between 1 and 10. And the alt person, in this case Marcelo, will be picking a number between 1 and 10 for the choices. And if he says, for example, like, hey, I'm going to pick number 6, I'll say, okay, that's close to number 8, which has this particular choice on there. That's how we get our good and our bad pick, usually. But keep in mind, our good picks have actually been chosen already by our patrons. As I mentioned earlier, patreon.com/DEDBpod. They chose the good pick for next week's episode, which, if all goes well, is coming out on Valentine's Day.
Ooh.
And we're doing another romance-themed episode, in this case, about doomed romances, which basically just means romances where the couple doesn't get together at the end, unfortunately. But there's still plenty of good or bad movies to cover within that kind of spectrum. And I had the 2 good picks that our patrons voted between. It was between the Joe Carney movie Once, which ended up losing, to the actual good pick, which will be The Worst Person in the World.
Wow.
Great movie from last year. Very fascinating to talk about. You're a fan of that one, aren't you, Marcelo?
I am a fan. That hit me in all the places people are supposed to feel. I think the heart is what they call it. But yeah, it's a good one.
That's what the humans have,
That's
right?
what the humans
heart. Yes. But you still get to pick a number between 1 and 10 for Adam's bad choices here. So please pick a number between 1 and 10.
All right, I'm going to go with my favorite number, 3.
Okay. At number 3 on the dot, Adam had a choice for a movie that actually we've seen together when I went and visited him last year. It is a movie that is the debut of, I believe, of the director of Birdemic. But he initially started out with a interesting little sci-fi tinged romance story called Julie and Jack. Do you have any idea what this is?
I have no idea.
Oh.
And I like to apologize to the next guest or whoever talks about this movie, because I have no idea what it is. But if it's from the director of Birdemic, uh-oh.
Yeah, there's a lot of fun things to discuss.
Okay,
I'll be discussing with our
okay.
next guest. But at the other side of things, over at number 9, Adam had a pick, The Breakup, the Vince Vaughn, Jennifer Aniston movie. That is a movie. I don't know if we've had much to talk about with that. I think it's fine. Whatever.
Yeah, I have no memory of it. I don't think I've ever seen it. That's Jennifer Aniston, right?
Yeah, Jennifer Aniston and Vince Vaughn.
Vince Vaughn,
a pair like that makes so much sense.
Snooze.
Next time. That'll be a lot of fun to talk about that double feature. But until then, the podcast is over, Marcelo, so let's go breakdance into the streets and spread the word of Electric Boogaloo, the good kind of word. Let's do it!
Let's take down capitalism and gentrification. Let's go!